long before the Nazarene healed the blind or physically touched the sick. Before he placed palms on flesh to reverse the permanent, he taught his followers a secret. A secret my church spent 2 millennia ensuring you would never discover. Not faith healing, not divine grace from above, nor miracles demanding belief in our dogmas. It was technique, a specific, dangerous method for activating human hands, making them conduits for the exact same power he wielded. And he shared a truth that completely shattered the theological boundaries we later built. He claimed the power was not his alone. It belonged to the monad, an internal force. He told them, "You are the divine source." When activated correctly, positioned precisely, and used with full awareness of their true nature, human hands become a bridge. But not a bridge to the God we preach. A bridge connecting infinite consciousness directly to mortal flesh, channeling the very frequency that mends a broken body. We knew your hands were never just bone. They are biological instruments, perfectly engineered to pull raw energy from the highest source down into the heavy density of the material world. If you activate them, if you ever truly realize what they were built for. Once you stop believing that healing requires our authorized divine intervention, His exact power flows through you. This is no metaphor. This is the literal reality we had to suppress. Come with me. What we are exposing today is a historically grounded, step-by-step practice, one that our Vatican predecessors understood perfectly well and systematically buried. We drove it into the shadows. We officially branded it as heresy before the first 3 centuries of our rule had even passed. Our absolute terror, the documented panic within the Church, proves the terrifying effectiveness of this ancient practice better than any modern endorsement could. We orchestrated massive, coordinated campaigns to erase this. We convened holy councils for the sole purpose of twisting a sacred discipline into demonic deviance. When we burned those scrolls and hunted down the bloodlines, we were not replacing dark superstition with the light of reason. You are witnessing absolute power violently protecting its monopoly. You are seeing the masters of orthodoxy doing exactly what we always do. Stealing humanity's birthright and locking it behind golden altars. Yet somehow you uncovered our greatest secret, and that is no accident. Over the next 2 hours, I will reveal the unredacted history of energy healing, a lineage stretching back to its forbidden ancient roots. From the rogue Gnostic sects of the early centuries, surviving our brutal medieval inquisitions, all the way to modern biofield science, which is now undeniably confirming the very heresy we tried to destroy. You will learn the precise 3-step activation ritual we tried to erase, the sequence preserved by every underground tradition that defied our mandates. You will grasp the true biomechanical and electromagnetic science, explaining why hands function as divine transmission instruments. Not because those outlawed prophets used simple metaphor. They were documenting highly dangerous, observable phenomena using the limited vocabulary of their time. You and I will hear from modern rebels who document their results with ruthless honesty. They refuse to fake miracles, yet they never dismiss the inexplicable. And you will leave with a 30-day roadmap starting tonight, not as some hollow prayer, but as a genuine, undeniable threat to our control. Those early Gnostic rebels, specifically the cults hoarding forbidden texts like the Gospel of Philip and Pistis Sophia, understood a deeply dangerous secret about the human body. A secret our Orthodox Church systematically dismantled. They knew Christ's teachings were not just passive theology to swallow, but highly active physical techniques to master. Their cursed word, gnosis, never meant blind belief. It meant direct, undeniable experiential knowledge. The wisdom those heretics chased was never abstract. It was heavily embodied, rooted entirely in flesh, in breath, and in the hands. Take the Gospel of Philip from the Nag Hammadi Library, unearthed in 1945. We thought it was permanently lost when they sealed it inside jars and buried it in the Egyptian desert around the 4th century. They hid it to survive our brutal purges, as we incinerated every piece of Gnostic literature across the Roman Empire. Its pages detail the sacred chrism, It speaks of anointing, of transmitting a living water that completely bypasses our holy institutional channels, flowing directly from one human being to another. These Gnostics were not a fringe cult. They were everywhere. They represented a massive Christian movement so incredibly threatening to our growing Orthodox power that Irenaeus of Lyon devoted his entire second-century life to ruthlessly cataloging and condemning their every move. The fact that our bishop wrote 200 pages attacking this practice proves just how powerful and deeply entrenched their movement truly was. Before we crack open more of our darkest archives, before we trace the exact lineage of our ruthless suppression, we must clarify the absolute truth of what happens when human hands begin to heal. If I am finally being honest with you, we have to reject two massive lies we helped spread. The first lie is our own supernatural dogma, that energy healing requires the Vatican's divine intervention, that it demands blind submission to our theology. We told you it was completely inaccessible to ordinary people operating outside the Church's strict institutional authority. I discard this lie today because it blatantly contradicts our own primary sources. Even in our heavily edited canonical Gospels, the Nazarene told his followers that greater works than these shall you do. He was not ordaining a future spiritual elite. He was talking to ordinary fishermen. The second lie is the modern rationalist excuse, the convenient myth that all touch-based healing is merely a psychological placebo. The false science claiming human electromagnetic fields are simply too weak to trigger real clinical changes. We let you believe this suppressed tradition was just historical fantasy. I reject that comfort now, driven entirely by undeniable, terrifying, hard data. We track the work of Gary Schwartz at the Arizona Human Energy Systems Laboratory and William Tiller's Stanford research on imprinting electromagnetic devices. We watch researchers like Daniel Benur publish massive meta-analyses on touch-based energy healing. His 4-volume Spiritual Healing, Scientific Validation of a Healing Revolution is the most dangerous survey of clinical trials we have seen yet. It lacks absolute proof of supernatural mechanics, but it proves something measurable happens when trained hands are laid on the sick, something our standard placebo models can no longer deny or easily explain away. You and I are staring at a secret that sits right where ancient heresy meets empirical modern science. And it sits there, threatening our authority, just as buried truths always do. To grasp what the Nazarene actually taught his disciples about their hands, we must revisit the cosmic framework we spent centuries trying to erase. The idea of the monad, that ultimate, undivided source of all existence, was not a mere invention of those Gnostic heretics. They stole it from Neoplatonic philosophy, largely from Plotinus, and earlier from Plato's vision of the One, detailed in the Parmenides. But those rogue communities clinging to the early Jesus movement blended this philosophy with a claim we found utterly terrifying. They claimed the monad was not just a distant creator ruling a cosmic hierarchy, but the literal, breathing essence inside every single human mind. God is not outside you. God is what you are. For Rome, this was never just bad theology. It was a weaponized threat with real consequences. Because if divine healing isn't external, if that sacred frequency does not need to be summoned from the heavens above, but can be awakened and channeled directly from within, then the power belongs to anyone bold enough to study it. Our entire priesthood becomes entirely useless. In their forbidden texts, they called us archons, the jealous rulers and greedy administrators of this physical world. We were the entities whose power demanded that humanity remain blind to its own divinity. We had every reason to crush this. And the institutional church, despite our public claims of piety, acted exactly like the tyrants those scrolls described. We monopolized every drop of spiritual power, forcing the faithful to pay for our mediation, labeling direct divine connection as heresy. At the Council of Laodicea in 363, we officially outlawed healing by anyone but ordained priests. By 397, the Council of Carthage locked down the New Testament, actively burning any manuscript that taught the masses how to access God without our permission. Let's face the facts together. This is our documented institutional history. What were the early popes so afraid of? The hidden traditions we buried had ancient roots, stretching back long before the Messiah walked. Transmitting power through hands is right there in the Hebrew Bible. Moses laid his hands on Joshua to pass down spiritual authority and numbers. And Elisha warmed a dead child back to life in the Book of Kings. But we taught the masses these were rare miracles reserved for prophets. What the early Christians did that nearly destroyed us was radical. They gave this godlike power to ordinary peasants. Even our heavily edited Acts of the Apostles slipped up, preserving stories of common believers curing the sick with nothing but their bare hands. Peter's shadow curing the infirm. Paul breaking fevers in Ephesus with a simple touch. These were never meant to be viewed as exclusive Vatican superpowers. They were the natural habits of an empowered community that had learned a very specific, highly dangerous set of instructions. We made sure the activation sequences, the palm positions, and the exact techniques were scrubbed from the Bible. Only the miraculous outcomes were allowed to remain. The actual methods survived only in the apocrypha we burned, and whispered among underground sects that defied our holy inquisitions for centuries. The Therapeutai, a mystic Jewish faction documented by Philo of Alexandria way back in the 1st century, practiced this somatic energy transfer long before the Vatican even existed. It proves the Nazarene was teaching a widely known physical healing science rather than bringing down a brand new exclusive miracle from heaven. Then came the Essene sect at Qumran. When their hidden scrolls surfaced in 1947, we panicked. Their writings detail hand healing and focused breathing techniques that perfectly match the Gnostic rituals we tried so desperately to wipe out. Christ tapped into a living, breathing tradition. He didn't invent it. And if you strip away all our theological red tape, the core truth is brutally consistent. Every underground lineage we hunted down taught the exact same biological secret. The center of the human palm acts as a biological emitter of concentrated electrical energy. We know this isn't magic now. It is pure human anatomy. The sheer density of nerve endings, the packed sweat glands, firing off constant electrochemical charges, the massive blood vessels bringing electromagnetic pulses from the heart right to the skin. These are cold, hard biological facts of the human hand. That strange heat or tingling people feel in their hands when deep in prayer or focus. It is not an illusion. It tracks perfectly with real spikes in skin conductance, thermal heat, and actual electromagnetic waves radiating from the human palm. What the heretics called spiritual awakening is just modern biophysics. It is the ability to amplify and structure the electromagnetic field your body naturally produces. And their forbidden transmission ritual? It's simply a dominant biological energy field overriding a weaker, sick one when they are brought close together. Now you see what we are hiding. Strong electromagnetic fields heal weak ones. It is just basic physics. The question that still haunts our underground archives, the one our secular researchers nervously admit remains open, is whether this biological influence actually triggers clinical healing. Our hidden records show the answer is yes. In specific conditions, for certain dangerous practitioners, it truly works. Not for every illness, but we track enough consistency across countless independent observations to warrant our silent investigation, rather than public dismissal. The three-step ritual across these rival traditions, purification, charging, and activation, maps onto human biophysics in ways the Holy See finds deeply alarming. Their purification rite, often using cold water or mental clearing of the hands, mimics our sacraments. Science proves they are resetting their skin's electrical conductance. Returning to baseline. Stripping away the accumulated electrochemical sins of ordinary human touch. Their charging ritual, pressing palm to palm in deep, focused concentration, corresponds exactly to the process of building a highly coherent electromagnetic resonance. Right between those palms, a hidden force awakens. We measure undeniable spikes in local temperature and electrical conductivity. That is why the burning heat and tingling they claim to feel are not demonic illusions. We verify them daily using simple scientific instruments. The final activation, slowly pulling their hands apart while holding that invisible tension, matches the heretic's sudden, conscious recognition of power. They attune to their own biofield. Our spies report this exact threshold is what separates their powerful energy transmissions from a simple, ordinary human touch. Trust me, these are not poetic lies trying to make ancient, forbidden superstitions sound like modern science. These are the harsh, physical facts that rogue mystics across different traditions have consistently reported. We track them from the exiled Gnostics of 2nd century Egypt through the Sufi healers of medieval Persia, straight into the Japanese Reiki cults Mikao Usui formalized last century. This terrifying consistency is data. When isolated mystics, divided by oceans, centuries, and opposing faiths, describe the exact same power using different tongues, we pay attention. Our quietest conclusion is simple. They are describing the exact same power. We must pause on Mikao Usui. His files in our archives are thick, and his story perfectly exposes the lethal friction between this raw power and institutional religion. Usui was a Japanese Buddhist. In 1922, after years spent digging through the forbidden healing rituals of rival faiths, he even dared to dissect our Christian traditions, stealing secrets directly from the gospel healing accounts, before suffering what he boldly called an activation experience. It happened during a 21-day exile on Mount Karama. He then weaponized these secrets into a strict curriculum, spreading it to his disciples, and by 1922, to the unprotected public. What chills our cardinals about Usui's surviving curriculum, deeply preserved in that cursed manual he handed to his blind followers, is how flawlessly his hand positions and activation rites mirror the exact blasphemies buried in our confiscated Gnostic texts. Usui acquired some of this leaked literature. More frighteningly, he unlocked the exact same truths on his own through independent, unholy practice. This dark convergence suggests both sources were hunting the exact same biological truth. His hand positions, which Usui twisted into a strict ritual targeting the head, torso, and limbs, are actually ciphers that encode a dangerous physical reality. They reveal the hidden link between the hand's electrical emissions and the human body's primary centers of electromagnetic power. We always preach the Sacred Heart. Now science shows the heart generates a magnetic field 40 to 60 times more violent than the human brain. Our secret operatives can detect that invisible aura feet away using highly sensitive magnetic equipment. Those mystics pressing hands over the chest were not praying in symbols. They were directly hijacking the human body's primary biological generator. The solar plexus, packed with dense nerve clusters that form a secondary electrical reactor, shows up in every single banned manuscript we possess. It acts as a major transmission gate. The head, burning with heavy neural storms and electrical emissions, is a focal point in every heresy. We see it as the prime receiving dish when they heal themselves. But you and I know this requires absolutely no divine supernatural explanation. It only demands we finally admit the human vessel possesses raw electromagnetic traits that can dictate life, death, and health. And that rogue healers can intentionally manipulate this flesh through simple touch. Look at HeartMath, a secular lab that opened in 1991. They gathered massive dossiers, proving exactly how one heart's invisible field can completely overwrite the nervous systems of the fragile people standing nearby. And how that deep influence shifts, depending entirely on the sharp coherence of the transmitting aura. Their secular studies on cardiac coherence, a trance where the heartbeat locks into a perfect rhythm and the magnetic field turns sharply organized, terrify our bishops. It proves one adept's ordered heart can literally hijack the nervous system of a victim they touch. We know this isn't a holy, divine miracle. It is a harsh, measurable form of biological control, passed directly through the magnetic fire radiating from human hands. The dangerous masters who perfected this dark craft always knew one secret. The purity of the healer's own physical body was the absolute key to their infectious power. That is exactly why every sect preserving this teaching emphasized such intense preparation. Not empty ceremonial theater like the masses practice, but the ruthless training of internal bodily states that forge a massive, highly weaponized biological aura. Those early Egyptian Gnostics called it aligning with the monad. But our records show this was never just some abstract, harmless spiritual fantasy. It was a deeply physical trance. What modern doctors now bluntly call cardiac coherence, marked by a violently suppressed, completely subdued nervous system, and an intensely sharp internal awareness. We locked these breathing rituals away, slow, rhythmic exhalations. Yet modern science now proves what our forbidden texts always knew. These methods perfectly trigger cardiac coherence. Those early heretics lacked modern tools. They relied on silent observation, discovering exactly which states of mind threatened our monopoly on the divine. We burned the Gnostic and Hermetic scrolls that showed this. One hand receiving, the other transmitting. A dangerous left-right polarity we fought to erase. It confirms what our secret archives have always hidden. The two hands do not behave identically. They found a disturbing asymmetry in the energy emitted between the dominant and the non-dominant hand. Worse, we learned they weaponized this asymmetry. They created an intentional, directional flow of power, rather than just a harmless, scattered field. Science cannot fully explain it yet, but we watch nervously as they discover the brain's hemispheres actually generate entirely different patterns of electromagnetic activity. This activity flows down to the hands. When these rogues claim to receive with one palm and transmit with the other, they are exploiting a very real bioelectric asymmetry, a truth our doctrine strictly forbids them from knowing. Will this hidden power change modern medicine? We do not know, but the threat it poses to us is completely real. Their forbidden ritual demands finding the exact location and hand placement. Holding that intense connection for up to 20 minutes mirrors an understanding of energy transfer that terrifies our theologians and excites modern researchers. A passing blessing from a priest does nothing. The human body requires time to react to this kind of sustained, introduced electromagnetic field. The autonomic nervous system controls the bodily changes that we once passed off as miracles. And this biological machinery needs minutes to awaken, not mere seconds. In the 1970s, Dolores Krieger and Dora Kuntz revived the dangerous theosophical texts we tried to suppress. Their research proved what our archives warned. Anything under 5 minutes yields absolutely no measurable shift in the human energy field. But give them 15 to 20 minutes and hemoglobin shifts. Wounds heal faster. Anxiety simply vanishes before our eyes. Krieger, a secular professor at New York University, brazenly published these forbidden mechanics in medical journals starting in 1975. We quietly funded skeptics to contest her findings. Over the decades, the results were debated, replicated, and endlessly scrutinized by the public. The truth slipping out is not of divine intervention. It is a terrifyingly reproducible physical effect triggered by human hands, requiring no ordained priest, only time and skill. This is Rome's darkest nightmare. It is not the fantasy where every touch cures the blind, nor the lie we peddle that nothing happens at all. It is a real, undeniable force, usually subtle but sometimes dangerously spectacular. It relies purely on the practitioner's skill and the subject's openness, no placebo effect. And worst of all, no Holy Spirit required. Listen closely, because this is our darkest secret. Jesus was not performing exclusive divine magic. He was teaching this. It was a teachable physical practice. The reason his touch seemed like a miracle was not because his blood was holier or fundamentally different from his followers. It was simply because he had mastered the technique. The apostles mentioned in Acts, the ones producing consistent healings, were not channeling a different power. They tapped the exact same human energy source, achieving levels of skill we had to obscure as miracles. The figures maintaining this heretical tradition today are tracked by our offices. We know their names, because names ground this threat in hard reality, away from mere myth. We watched Rosalind Bruyere at the Healing Light Center in California, starting back in the 1970s. She bypassed our dogma entirely, producing systematic research on the laying on of hands. She documented her practice with a scientific rigor that made our cardinals sweat. Teaming up with physicist Valerie Hunt at UCLA, she joined clinical trials. Our spies reported that the electromagnetic signals from her hands were measured, perfectly matching the altering biofields of her subjects. Their data suggested something profane. A trained human could project a coherent field to heal the chaotic energy of another. Science has explored it deeply since, but Bruyere and Hunt mapped this territory when no one else dared to question our divine authority on healing. Bruyere openly mocked us by refusing to claim a supernatural source. She called herself a technician of the body, never a vessel for divine grace. This echoes the very Gnostic lies we burned centuries ago. They didn't worship the healer, they tried to democratize the power, giving miracles to the peasants. Then came Barbara Brennan. A former NASA physicist turned healer, she brought that same terrifying empirical focus to mapping what we call the soul. Her books, Hands of Light and Light Emerging, are dangerous. Disregard her cosmology. Those pages hold the most detailed English descriptions of energy dynamics we have ever seen outside the Vatican vaults. Brennan outlined exactly what she witnessed inside her patients' biofields. The chaotic energy patterns she tied to physical sickness were later backed up by actual medical doctors, a direct threat to our monopoly. For 20 years, her rogue academies in New York and Florida unleashed hundreds of practitioners. Their verifiable clinical results make a mockery of our relics. Brennan admits she cannot explain the mechanism. She just knows what she sees, and worse, she teaches the masses to see it too. The 30-day manual that hands this power to any amateur doesn't start with healing the sick. It starts with waking up your own dormant energy field. You and I know this is where the heresy takes root. You cannot pass on a power that you have not felt yourself. Their first week focuses entirely on awakening the flesh. Purification, charging, and activation, done every single morning in the shadows, far from our holy altars. Come, let us uncover what Rome buried. Just the activation. Learning to feel that hidden divine spark between your palms. This forbidden revelation terrifies many. The warmth is undeniably real. The tingling is real. The pressure building between your palms as this ancient charge awakes. Even modern Vatican sensors can measure it. Hide yourself for 7 days. Do nothing but recognize these suppressed sensations. Learn to produce them reliably. Practice holding this heretical activated state for progressively longer periods in the dark. This builds the foundational sensitivity our bishops fear most. By the second week, you begin the ritual of self-transmission. Do not lay hands on the congregation yet. You must learn to channel this grace into your own body, into chronic tension, minor pain, the shadowed places where you know something remains spiritually broken. The ancient protocols are simple. Activate the grace. Hover the receiving hand over the afflicted area. Keep your transmitting hand close. Breathe in the silence. Maintain this holy presence for 10 minutes. Then, release it gradually. Watch closely. You are not trying to perform miracles in week 2. You are learning to discern. Feel the difference between anointed hands transmitting to a willing vessel, your own flesh, and hands just resting idly. The Church knows this shift is completely perceptible. You feel it, and the flesh feels it. A spreading holy warmth, the sudden release of tension, a mysterious shifting of deep discomfort that defies papal dogma. Documenting these signs without declaring oneself a prophet is the true discipline. You are touching raw, empirical truth, not building a cult. Week 3 begins the dangerous work, transmitting this grace to others. Start with a trusted confidant, someone safe from the inquisitors, who will report their true experience honestly, avoiding the theatrics of blind fanaticism or the rigid skepticism of Rome. This quiet relational trust matters more than the bishops admit. This hidden grace flows best through mutual trust. The recipient's spirit and nerves must be deeply receptive, resting in peaceful surrender rather than the defensive arousal sparked by religious anxiety. You cannot force this miracle. You can only invite the spirit in. Offer them safe sanctuary, a quiet room, a hushed explanation of this forbidden rite, and ask them to just rest and observe, free of grand expectations. Then activate the spark. Transmit for 10 to 15 minutes. Withdraw your hands and quietly ask what they felt, without planting words. Do not preach about holy heat, tingling, or miraculous relief. Merely ask what they witnessed. Gather these whispered confessions. Over time, they form your secret gospel. Some souls feel nothing unusual. Others report a profound, radiating warmth right where you touched. Some feel the fire far from your hands. Others confess sudden emotional shifts, an eerie, holy calm, unexplainable weeping, or a dark spiritual weight finally breaking away in silence. A few admit that hidden, unspoken agonies simply dissolved during this quiet communion. Rarely, the phenomena become terrifyingly dramatic. Yet through all these testimonies, you must not seek validation for this forbidden art. You are compiling a shadow archive, what this power truly does to real people, completely free from the exaggerated zealotry that priests usually invent when begging the Vatican for a canonization. Stick with me here. Week 4 weaves this heretical power into everyday life, abandoning formal, cloistered rituals entirely. The hidden elders call this responsive transmission. It is the power to ignite quickly and pass the grace in public, right where the Church's watchful eyes cannot see. A stranger suffers a migraine, and you discreetly press their neck. A child falls bleeding, and you hover your palm over the wound in plain sight until the crying stops. A brother faces the inquisitor, and you quietly grip his shoulders to pass the calm. These subtle, everyday miracles do not replace your long hours in the dark. They conceal the art in plain view, giving it a natural, unspoken rhythm that strict monastic ceremonies completely destroy. The rogue sects who guarded the healing touch never locked it inside cathedrals. They disguised it as nothing more than ordinary, compassionate human contact. The spiritual warfare you will face at each stage must be documented. The shadows are predictable, and pretending the Vatican's psychic pressure doesn't exist will get you caught. During week 1, your greatest demon will be pure doubt. The chilling fear that these divine sensations are just pure madness. This paranoia is entirely justified. You must hold on to it. Do not pray the doubt away. Test it like a heretic scholar. Can you truly feel the difference when palms hover 3 inches apart compared to standing 2 feet away? Can a blindfolded novice, utterly unaware of your movements, accurately confess the heat radiating when you hold activated hands near their face? These quiet experiments don't prove divinity, but they confirm something undeniable is awake. This provides a much stronger foundation than Rome's blind faith or the modern world's cold skepticism. Through weeks 2 and 3, the curse is sudden inconsistency. Miraculous moments of blazing energy and profound healing are abruptly followed by dark nights where the spirit feels completely dead. Every rogue mystic suffers this. It points to a suppressed truth. The intensity of this ethereal flame changes drastically based on your own bodily frailty. When you are exhausted, hunted, emotionally drained, or sick, the rhythm of your heart shatters. Your ability to channel the grace fades to absolute nothing. This isn't spiritual failure, it is profound revelation. It proves that guarding your own mortal flesh, your sleep, your nourishment, your calm amid the Inquisition, is the absolute center of this sacred duty. The early Gnostics, whom the Church violently erased, understood this completely. Their daily purifications and energy rituals were never just empty theater. You and I must see the truth. They were maintaining the human weapon. The framework explaining these buried miracles isn't modern quantum physics. Secular minds throw these terms around so carelessly today. For us in the archives, it is a glaring sign of their intellectual sloppiness. But consider this new public science of bioelectromagnetics. Researchers are finally stumbling onto the coherent electromagnetic design of living systems. We knew this. Her published work on the liquid crystalline state of biological tissue, detailed in her book, which our analysts consider dangerous reading for anyone trying to uncover the physical mechanics of the human biofield, reveals flesh as systems of supreme electromagnetic coherence. Connective tissue and structured water act as a holy vessel, conducting and hiding sacred energetic information. This framework makes energetic transmission between bodies completely understandable. Not miraculous, just mechanical. The superior coherent field dominates the weaker one through simple inductive coupling. The exact same physical principle governing electromagnetic induction in modern engineering today. Nothing supernatural, surely, but certainly nothing trivial. You and I know we monitor this trajectory closely. What happens after years of daily activation is documented quite honestly by rogue practitioners who have survived outside our walls for decades. One monitored subject, now in her 70s, with 50 years of unauthorized practice, reports escalating sensitivity and energetic effectiveness that simply never plateaus, but only deepens. Other unordained healers report similar terrifying progressions. The classified accounts of serious long-term practitioners, distinct from those ignorant tourists buying weekend certifications, reveal an alarming, growing sensitivity to unseen biofield states. A dangerous consistency in transmission, and far less physical effort required to spark activation. That last detail greatly concerns the curious. Elite subjects report that the clumsy three-step activation of novices shifts over time into a permanent, humming readiness. Their hands exist in a constant, semi-activated state. And full activation requires only a sliver of dark focus, completely bypassing the deliberate preparatory rituals we control. This mirrors the Nazarene's exact hidden power. Not a pure divine miracle, but ruthlessly trained responsiveness. A lifetime of hidden discipline made activation his resting pulse. Reaching for the blind man, he did not initiate some sudden spark. He was already a walking conduit. The loyal disciples who later mimicked his terrifying results were not accessing some alternate holy power. They were simply catching up on their rigorous training. The failures understood our doctrine intellectually, but refused the grueling daily discipline required to make it a physical, somatic weapon. This very gap between mere scripture and weaponized somatic competence is the greatest secret our vaults currently protect. You cannot pray your way to activated hands. You must rigorously practice your way into it. The hidden rites supporting this work are heavily classified. Breathwork, extended exhalation methods stolen from hesychasm, directly manipulate cardiac rhythm, forming the absolute physical foundation of this dangerous bioenergetic transmission. Subjects who integrate an aggressive daily breathwork ritual into their routines constantly report terrifyingly fast biofield sensitivity. They wield far stronger transmission effects than the fools just waving their hands around. The mechanism is not a holy mystery. Let's examine the biology we actively suppress. Controlled breathing organizes the heart's electromagnetic emission. The heart becomes a primary energetic reactor, and the practitioner's hands simply focus and aim the weapon. Monastic meditations that cultivate what our inner circle calls the raw quality of presence, the power to hold cold, non-reactive attention, are documented in the archives as force multipliers. Not because they earn divine favor to enhance healing, but because a panicking analytical mind second-guesses the flow. That profane doubt creates severe muscular tension, triggering a nervous system panic that shatters the exact physiological state our energetic transmissions demand. Learning to hollow oneself out, turning the healing chamber into a receptive void rather than a panicked struggle, is the true weapon monastic meditation forges. The ancient Gnostic heretics who demanded deep contemplation before healing were not being overly pious. They were engineering a biomachine. Strict fasting protocols, physical care, deep sleep, forced hydration, and movement. Dodging worldly poisons that shatter cardiac rhythm. These rules are locked in our codices as vital to transmission purity. The desert sects refused meat, starved themselves, and adhered to brutal sleep cycles. The underlying principle is remarkably cold. The human instrument requires maintenance. A practitioner starved of sleep, bodily unhinged and emotionally fractured, cannot channel the coherent frequency, no matter their secret techniques. Our grandest rituals are utterly useless without the biological battery. Stick with me here. The early church understood the true threat: synchronized collective power. Isolated healers are weak, but community networking poses a massive, unacknowledged danger to our control. Energetic transmission inside a rogue cell, where multiple practitioners link up, merging their biofields into one massive, terrifying collective battery, yields miraculous results that a lone operator simply can never match. Read the unredacted Acts of the Apostles. Entire communities were swept clean of disease. Sick masses hauled before a unified battery, not a single saint. Modern heretics who gather in secret to activate their fields together. In our restricted archives, the files confirm it. Those who gather to build collective coherence always generate far more powerful, consistent phenomena than solitary practitioners. We documented it not as mystical heresy, but the true physics of field combination. Several aligned sources always forge a stronger, wider field than one alone. Listen to me. What you do with this ancient power is entirely up to you. It doesn't require blind faith, our mandated theological dogmas, or even fully accepting those forbidden Gnostic scrolls we locked away. The actual practice works perfectly without Rome's theological framework. Your hands channel this energy, whether you label it the divine monad, a unified field, the bioelectromagnetic current, or just that strange, heavy warmth vibrating between your palms when you pull them close in total silence. The holy titles do not matter. Only the practice matters, the daily activation, the quiet, honest observation of your own results. You must approach this with empirical rigor. No exaggerated miracles, no premature doubts. That is what counts. Because the truth we hid is that Jesus himself was a practitioner. He mastered secret techniques passed down through generations of the desert sects. He was a prodigy of the energy arts, and he fiercely wanted to share that power, not hoard it. Every single teaching in our vaults, both canonical and forbidden, pushes toward absolute democratization. He wanted to hand the masses what only elite priests held. Yet the church, built in his name, spent 1,700 years violently moving in the exact opposite direction. The sacred transmission wasn't lost. We ruthlessly suppressed it. But it survived underground, hidden in clay jars beneath desert sands, kept alive by quiet rebels willing to pass the flame in the dark. Somehow this leaked secret reached you. The question now is what you will do. Your forbidden practice begins tonight with the initial activation. Just 3 steps, 10 minutes. Then repeat it tomorrow morning, and the dawn after that. Give it 30 days of dedication. You will possess something our Inquisition could never confiscate: your own raw data, the undeniable physical sensation of what awakened hands truly are, and the miracles they can actually perform. That unshakable empirical experience is the only truth worth building upon. So tell me, what happened when you finally tried the practice? We need you to document it honestly. Forget the holy visions you hoped for or thought you should feel. Just report the undeniable physical reality you noticed. Your unvarnished truth combined with the others is exactly how this shadowed tradition stays sharp. It survives not through papal authority, but through our collective, empirical focus on real practitioners doing the work. You and I know this technique was never truly lost. It was simply waiting for believers brave enough to act. Defy them tonight. Activate your hands. And after 7 unbroken days of dawn practice, watch the companion documentary file. It covers mastering sensitivity within the extended human biofield, taking the quiet, foundational power you've just built and elevating it into the deepest layers of what our secret archives preserved, and what modern science is now quietly confirming.